Unlike most of my builds, this time I drew up a plan. This is a list of all the pieces I need to make 3 15-jar spice racks. I want to utilize as much of this half sheet of plywood as possible, while maintaining consistent grain orientation. Item 1 and 3 will be running in the same direction, therefore they'll be cut along the grain of the wood. Item 2 will be perpendicular, so it'll be cut cross grain. As you can see, this half sheet is not quite large enough to get all the parts I need. I'll need to find another small piece to cut the remaining 2 pieces of item 2. The material I'm using is a 3/8 inch Baltic birch ply. It's normally used for cabinet making, so it comes in 5-foot square sheets. I bought this half sheet specifically for this project. This plywood is amazing to work with. It has many layers which make it dimensionally stable and super strong. There are no voids, and the face veneers are about as thick as the inner ones, which allows for more sanding and finishing without breaking through to the next layer. Planning ahead like this allows me to set up the table saw at a certain length and make all the cuts that require that length. Many of the pieces have common dimensions due to the way I'll be assembling the box. That means for this project, I'll only have to set up the table saw at 4 different dimensions. Planning and setup are often more time consuming than the actual cutting and assembling, so reducing setups and working in batches greatly reduces the time it takes to make each unit. It also makes the pieces more consistent since they're all cut on the same setup. Some pieces were cut on the miter saw because, well, I don't know, reasons. This consists not only of marking the length you want to cut the piece, but measuring where on the mark you want to cut to get as close to the desired length as possible. You may want to cut the entire mark off, leave most of the mark, or even cut to a certain part of the mark. This will give you much greater accuracy than the thickness of your pencil. For the same reason, I often measure my table saw cuts with a ruler rather than the built-in guide. There are a couple reasons why. One is that I'm using a thick fence, which makes the guide about an inch off. Another reason is accuracy. The ruler I use has markings down to 1/32 of an inch, which means I can usually get the fence to within 1/64 of an inch of where I want it by setting the edge of the blade on or between the tick marks. If I wanted even more accuracy, I would make a test cut in a piece of scrap and measure it with a caliper. I'd make an adjustment based on that and then retest. Accuracy beyond 1/64 of an inch is rarely required in woodworking, but it allows you to reliably achieve snug fits and seamless joints, which make assembly and the finished product much nicer. Once all the pieces are cut, it's time to drill the holes for the spice jars. All 3 front pieces are double-sided taped together and taped to a sacrificial backing. This allows the bit to break through the bottom without blowing out the back of the plywood. Each hole location is marked, the boards are clamped down, and drilled with a Forstner bit. The drilling didn't start out great. The bit wasn't really cutting, it was more wearing away the material. This bit was not new, or very sharp for that matter, so it would take more force to get the cutting edge to bite in. However, if I applied more force, the drill would stop. The motor wasn't stalling, the belt was slipping. I moved the belt to the slowest position to give me the greatest amount of torque, but the belt still slipped. The obvious next step was to tighten the belt, which did the trick. As you can see, I'm able to apply enough force to get the bit to bite into the wood and cut out strips rather than little chips. This is what you're looking for with a Forstner bit. The rest of the holes went well. I found it was handy to line up the tip of the drill bit with the center mark on the board and press the bit down into the wood to hold it in place while clamping. This way I knew the board was clamped in the right position and I didn't have to try to adjust it after it was clamped. I bought a pack of jars and tested out a few hole sizes. I found that the tighter the hole is around the jar, the less likely the jar is to fall out, and it didn't impede removing or replacing the jar. I landed on 2 5/8 inch diameter holes, with roughly 3/4 of an inch of wood between each hole. This leaves enough material for strength and allows enough room for your fingers to grab the jar. Now to separate all the pieces without damaging them. With all the force applied from drilling, the tape had got a good hold on the wood. I used a chisel to slowly wedge each piece apart. The tape was quite tenacious, so I think next time I would only use about 1/2 inch square on each corner. The glue from the tape was quite annoying as well. A solvent didn't do too much, and I didn't want to use too much for risk of staining the wood. What ended up working best is sanding it off with a random orbit sander. To make the joints, there are two setups. Both use a dado blade set to cut a groove with a width and a depth equal to half the thickness of the plywood. One cut is half the thickness of the plywood from the edge to form a dado groove, and the other is on the edge to form a rabbet. Once all the dado grooves are cut, the fence is moved to cut the rabbets, just like this. Except, these are wrong. They should have been on the other side of the board. So after cutting and dadoing a new piece, I cut the rabbet in the right place this time, followed by the rest of the pieces. Each of the spice racks will either be left natural or stained, so any scuffs or marks must be cleaned up by sanding the faces of each piece. All of the cut edges are also sanded to remove any burrs that may interfere with assembly. On to final assembly. A quick strip of glue in each groove will hold everything together. Since the joints are so tight, just a little bit of glue is required to hold everything. If more glue is used, it just adds to the cleanup. If glue squeezes out of the joint, it'll have to be wiped up. If glue squeezes into the inside of the box, it would be difficult to clean up due to the limited access. Since there's no fasteners, assembly goes really quick. This is the entire assembly step in real time. The box only needs to be clamped in one direction to hold it all together. 8 clamps for half an hour is all it takes. Filling all the voids and joints with wood fill will add a bit of refinement to the spice rack. I'm not sure how these will be oriented or mounted, so all sides have to look good. Once sanded, they're ready for finishing. I'm finishing 2 in a walnut colored Danish oil, and the last one will be natural. The 3 spice racks I just made will be given to family and friends, or find another good home. I knew I wanted to use jars for spices because I was tired of having an array of mismatched containers. Some small, some huge, some spices I could only find in bags. And I don't have much drawer space, so I wanted to find a solution that gave me easy access to all my spices, and even other things like nuts and seeds. After many iterations, I settled on this design and built a custom version to fit my pantry. This one includes a center shelf for commonly used oils. It's located right next to my stove, so adding a dozen different spices to a curry is no longer a hassle. Once filled with jars, you can see how easy it is to remove them, and how difficult it is for them to fall out. They should only fall out if you want them to, or if you're really careless. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to see more.